conference is a wonderful opportunity to extend the space of the Academy and to share our concerns with the larger community. We are trying to find out a little bit more specifically how can we relate to each other critically and how can we support each other.
What is the position of art today and what are the conditions under which art emerges? We have this question like, where are we? Do we really meet? Do we cross the scenes? Do we really know each other?
Room 736.
But I'm convinced that there is a chance and opportunity and a necessity for artists to take a leading role in that process of transition.
Hi, I'm the director of Theaterschool Amsterdam, and we have to figure out what you want to do.
Hi, I'm the director of Parts in Brussels, and we want to challenge you every day.
I think it's important to start to understand how also we can relate to that, you know, so not just taking something and taking it for granted, but maybe also how I can, I don't know, shape it or influence it a little bit, or how we can organize each other to influence something, maybe.
You can also interfere in the market space itself. For example, by making things free again. For example, by putting, like Lessig did, things under Creative Commons, Cultural Commons, etc. Making kind of also spaces in you talked about squats, I think, yesterday. Making kind of new spaces in the public space which are not rationalized anymore. Dismeasuring those spaces. Anyway, this is speculative, this may be utopia, but I think at least there are very concrete, empirical, proven ways to do this. And it's not so difficult. It's not so difficult. At the ground floor to start with this making cultural Creative Commons. And this cultural Creative Commons is very necessary to stay creative also in the long run. By saying this, I say also we never can go back to the former biotope with the 4 schemes and with the nice borders between this. It's all over. It's all over. We have to do something else. And this is that's why I call, we have to intervene. There has to be an intervention again in the market, in the domestic space.
Society achieves an awareness of itself and a consciousness through that which is formed in art. This is made possible by the basic freedom from being bound to a specific goal or intention. Beginning with this understanding of the nature of art, or the nature of the production of art, we would like or we want to talk about the production of art and its public funding. So on that basis, on that very profound understanding that we work in a fields of commons, this significance of art for us stands at the beginning of talking about public funding and not questions of economy, of efficiency, of the artistic producer as an entrepreneur. The activities of cultural producers are still celebrated as assets and investments in the future of the post-industrial city. The promises of success surrounding the new economy of creativity, however, conceal a reality of desolate work and living standards. We reject demands to provide the culturalization of the economy with a veneer of artistic glamour. This would entail working towards the commonization of culture, and the first victim of that process is art itself. Whoever reduces art to its usability, standards of efficiency and market compatibility is denying the essential meaning of art and culture in a heterogeneous, open and democratic society.
The city of Brussels, well, the region of Brussels is thinking more and more of presenting or selling Brussels as a creative city. I think for the elections that are coming up now in Brussels, creative city will be one of the slogans that will be used. And of course, as a cultural sector, you have to position yourself on that term. On the one hand, the cultural sector is quite in favor of that, because finally the region is taken into account culture. While it's not their affair, the region is not responsible for culture, but they realize if they want an identity, culture is part of it, blah, blah, blah. So they do see the logic behind, but on the other hand, what do they mean with creative city? And it's probably a whole other meaning than what the cultural sector wants to do with it. So we are now entering this debate. We invited the minister president of the Brussels region to discuss with the cultural sector on this concept. If you want to use it, what does it mean for you and what does it mean for us? And let's please try to collaborate and find our common goals there.
So is there a place for the creative class? Maybe not, but definitely one for what Daniel Bell, sociologist, coined the cultural mass. It's the people that are as a fringe around the creative core of artists, the mediators, the people from the popular media who are amplifying what is actually being created and progressively replacing the artistic core. And I think that is one of the key challenges we're facing here in Amsterdam, that art, culture, the creative industries are all put on one big pile. Local politicians don't see the difference. They're spending a lot of money, they think, on art, but it ends up in the pockets of advertising agencies and things that are related to art but in themselves are not creative.
Structures of support or structures to create work, and all of it in a very, very different way. So there is no coherency. I think that these certain people, that they also don't know each other, or the majority from Amsterdam probably, but people from Brussels and Berlin probably not.
I come from the visual arts, and what you see in the visual arts is that there's a system for people who have graduated from the academy going on to post-academy, and there's a system for when you're really old and established. And in between there's a kind of wild zone of nomadic possibilities of having residencies, and when you have exhausted those, there's not really any other point to recharge or reorientate or to focus.
There isn't, at least in Germany, there isn't much money for artistic research at all. There is not the idea of that. You have to create structures.
So I'm good at writing project applications, and the difficulty for me is that I always end up doing what I wrote. And then I was thinking, don't write anything, you know, to make sure that you don't determine in advance what you're going to do, but rather try to find other ways of putting yourself at work.
Yeah.
Is this mode of existence, which is not totally out there, not to be answering some macroeconomic or macro-social point of view of something, and it's not something totally selfish that I do with myself, but there are these practices that I go along, which they can go both ways.
We will not be able to articulate the mode or the conditions that everyone needs. I think it's being articulated and re-articulated a lot.
What I would maybe like to see more, in order I can engage more with people that I'm already anyway working with, is a kind of real articulation, very small, micro, step by step, within everyone's own practice. What do I need for what I want, if I don't want to be Hans van Manen, at this moment now?
You need to first understand whether you actually need it, if you need to address this macro scale question, because I feel we are kind of reactive and not proactive.
We are searching for this terminology in what connects us with different artists from all disciplines.
Yeah.
So it shouldn't be about what your main skill is, but what your urge is to create or evoke something.
It's a kind of very simple economy we work upon. We come, we play a concert, and we get paid. And that's basically it, and that's kind of refreshing to work like that and to keep it in that simple idea.
What does it mean to make something in operative? What does it mean to say that I would prefer not to do something? So yeah.
I think this collapse of revolution and art, this ties between revolution and art in producing something new are quite strong, and I think in that sense we should try to aim at all and everything.
Yeah.
Art institutions are delegating responsibility to the artists. Funding bodies are delegating responsibility to art institutions. Government is delegating responsibility to the funding bodies. It's a phenomenon that I would call delegating the responsibility, which in a way has all these emancipatory practices behind, that you empower somebody by giving somebody the responsibility to make decisions and have ideas and thoughts. But it has the double edge, which is the one that you remove the responsibility from yourself.
As we try to work tailor-made, I say, for each artist and try to define their needs. You were talking about you have to articulate your needs all the time. I think this is something I do a lot with the artists we work with, is to have an ongoing dialogue with them, like what are your needs, what are your plans, how can we facilitate them? But I think we are also an organization that is trying to articulate those needs within different institutions and try to make this translation all the time. What's also quite particular about our organization is that we're functioning within and with the institutions we work with. So a lot of arts labs, they also have their own infrastructure and they have their own space, but we are working within those institutions, which is quite interesting, I would say, because we also have an ongoing dialogue with them.
Through being part of the scene, like we can try to touch what's going on and then try to formulate and reformulate. So in a way, the research is also part of what is the whole nature of this organization, is trying to facilitate the sharing of knowledge within the field, I think, and that's part. I think in that sense also over the last 20 years, the VTI has been part of what looks like a very empowered field, because we organize our own discussions, also about policy, about what is our position in the world. So it's not single dots of institutions and artists, but we try to have an ongoing discussion about what we do, how we do it, and how it's positioned in the larger world.
It's extremely difficult to implement in such a big house that is actually also routine for presentation. So it's an experiment also in how to open up space within our organization to really be able to respond to their needs. but it has learned us already quite some things about how we work and how we should also change our way of working. And on the other hand, being able to continue what we do.
In that sense, actually, also the text you're mentioning, I was able to make because I was working at the university and I had time. Because indeed, in order to understand what's going on, you need time to observe, time to listen, and to reconnect the dots.
The future will look very different, and so we have to proactively reinvent that and rehearse our future, because that's where we're going to spend the next years together in.
The fact you could have a music like Burials, which kind of you had to hear in this double way. You had to hear first of all as about contemporary moment, but also about contemporary moment that was in a way coloured by the heavily coloured by the past. A contemporary moment that really couldn't articulate itself as present. A contemporary moment which was then defined in a way by the lack of anything that was actually present, the lack of anything that defined the 21st century as the 21st century. This sense of time, I think, disappearance of a sense of specificity of time is something we've grown increasingly accustomed to as the 21st century has worn on. I think it's interesting to address this via music, because I think those of us of a certain generation would, in a way, measure cultural time by the development of music, and you can date particular periods via changes in music, and these changes will be very rapid. Certainly, in retrospect, incredibly rapid, by comparison with the sense of cultural time which we now have, which is very slow. Extremely slow, I would argue.
First of all, I understand art as a social practice, but on the other hand, I think that now we live in the times when the historical notion of art, on which many of us involved in the field rely, somehow comes to its historical end, and that actually we need to rethink the notion entirely. Because I think that we have been learned for already 2.5 centuries that art was an avant-garde of society. But then with austerity measures and budget cuts and so on, we started, many of us, thinking about who stands behind us. And then I would say that if we look around, we could be quite disappointed, because we wouldn't see tens, thousands of workers, miners, big social forces and so on. We can mostly see our colleagues and friends, like quite small circle. So in a way, I think what could be one of the approaches, I also don't want to say that it's the best one, the crucial one, and so on, is to try also to think in a different way. Not to think about who stands behind us as an avant-garde of society, but behind whom do we stand today as art, which is not an avant-garde any longer. This line of thoughts that Isabel already proposed by saying that actually when Esposito explains comunitas by the negative, by sharing nothing and so on, where obligation and gift-giving appears and keeps us together, he also says that actually the very fact of sharing the obligation and the duty abolishes the idea of immunity. And then on the other hand, in his book Immunitas, he actually shows that communitas and immunitas share the same etymological root, of course, which is munus, but the approaches to the munus are diametrical. One is about sharing the munus, the other one is about being free from munus. And for Esposito, the idea of immunity and immunization actually means that we tend to be free and not to owe anything to anyone. On the other hand, he says that actually it's in his view it's not, of course, what is in the core of the notion of communitas. Yeah, but that's how contemporary society, which is based on Hobbesian premises like fear and so on, actually function. That no one actually share the obligation and care for one another.
2 years ago, I got involved with Unlike Us, which is a network of artists, researchers, activists, software developers, who are all concerned with current uses of social media. The social becomes a software effect. So you need to basically go through all these social media formats. You need to click buttons. You need to like. You also need to be algorithmically ranked to engage in social life. So so this is the commodified self. Unlike Us, regards these issues as an object of analysis, but also as a field of inquiry to think about, okay, what kind of experimental projects are responding to these issues. This is a developer who's working on another project called SecuShare. It's not about how much you want to make believe you got nothing to hide. It's about your civic duty not to be a predictable populace. So I think, from this quote you can clearly see that their aim is something different. They want to say, okay, you should stop care about your individual privacy. It's not about you. It's about companies and governments bring into view like whole populations of data that they are managing, and it's our task to interrupt that data flow and not become manageable as a populace.
Do you think people would be more literate on a digital level? A lot more could happen in the way of politicizing this recapturing of a political sphere.
It costs effort and some discipline to kind of reshape yourself into somebody who has a different relationship with technology.
I think we need a model of care without community, as it were.
Of what? Sorry?
Of care without community. Now, this is what you've got with something like that. Why that people like the National Health Service in the UK or socialised healthcare is that you don't have to be a member of a community. You don't have to know people in order to receive the care. The care is impersonally delivered, and this is an achievement. This is an achievement of a progressive culture. The disarticulation of care from community, I think, actually. And that, I think in other words, I think we need to be true to our own desires. That we cosmopolitanism, experience of impersonality of the urban world, etc. We all want that. But it's a question of how that is articulated alongside the demand for security, etc.
I would like to ask you if you see tendencies of somehow that translate maybe or transfer or transform this kind of social drama in today's art.
I think that wherever I go, I see these kind of initiatives and so on. And then in some places they're quite visible, in some others not. They're mostly not that visible. But it's still important for me to emphasize and to acknowledge their existence just in order to shape this smooth hegemonic idea about how contemporary cultural scenes exist.
Because one of the things that's become clear is that the gambit of neoliberalism was this idea that somehow insecurity or precarity, it creates conditions for innovation. And I think it's obviously now clear that is false. That actually the reverse is the case. That in a way quite banal bureaucratic, the level of quite banal bureaucratic politics, about things like housing policy, etc., these are the areas actually that we can focus on in order to revivify kind of cultural production, I think, in lots of ways. That, you know, in other words, certain kinds of security are necessary in order for newness to emerge. That, you know, generalized insecurity produces repetition, and, you know, the kind of comfort food of culture, really, which we're all used to kind of absorbing now.
When you see all the levels here in the conference, it was amazing for me to see very practical discussions about how you artists organize themselves, what are practical processes, and let's end up today in very high level theoretical information and thoughts and load up thinking, what I like very much. In history, there's a parallel between the coming up neoliberalism, the coming up post-Fordism, and that we all talk in the art world about ourselves as contemporary art. This is the loss of time in the art world, contemporary art. I think really this dimension yesterday we saw with John of the John House band was a moment where I get the feeling that you can jump out of this contemporary.
Thank you for your dedicated time, experienced time. I think it's quite precious to have so many people staying with us and let's say obey to this indeed very mixed leveled encounter. I think it's very true what you said, and I think for me personally, although this idea of the conference and how we have discussed it and then constructed it came out of a very kind of concrete concern about the situation in our city and the people that relate to, I feel I have gotten a lot more concerns, not yet solutions. So it gives me a very good feeling of there's a lot of work to do. Thank you.
As it motherfucking is, including all the rich fucks that caused the crisis. Let's celebrate, cause it's soon their time to fall. All you rich fuckers, your heads are gonna roll. But what the fuck, pussy, penis, fuck do I know? Will moon shaking be enough to stop the money flow? Can a twisted turn be enough to see the corporates burn? Will a pirouette make an end to it? This is not a form of resistance unless you dance. Men will make a risky move to stand a chance. This is not a form of resistance unless you dance. Make a risky move to stand a chance. So, let's celebrate the world as it motherfucking is. Like a Netanyahu handshake, a Gorbachev kiss. Dismiss this or his eternal fucking promise of another fucking world and the one that is. But what the fuck, pussy, penis, fuck do I know? Will moon shaking be enough to stop the money flow? Can a top rock shock? Will a down rock knock the stock market out or not? Can a top rock shock? Will a down rock knock the stock market out or not?